The Story Keepers, Starlight Escape by Brian Brown and Andrew Melrose. Chapter 4. Starlight campfire burning bright. The horse was skidding on the steep slope, trying to stop, but the heavy wagon kept rolling faster and faster. "We'll tip over!" Helena cried. Milo, his feet braced against the front board, pulled back on the reins as hard as he could. "Whoa, Regis, whoa!" The wagon slid sideways, and there was a cracking sound as it skidded to a stop at the edge of a steep riverbank. A few inches more, and the horse and wagon, with everyone in it, would have rolled over into the dry riverbed. "Phew," said Helena. "That was a close one." "Yahoo!" cried Milo. "What a ride!" "Is everyone okay?" asked Ben. "I think so," replied Helena. "But the wagon's not," said Zach, jumping down. "Look at this front wheel. It's broken. So much for our story meeting. We'll never get to Ostia now." Milo climbed down from the wagon, walked to the back, and removed a box of tools that he had tucked in the corner. "Don't be so sure, laddie boy. I said I'd get you to Ostia, and I mean to do just that. As for you, just stay out of what's left of my hair." "Ben, I'm cold," said Marcus, sitting up on the wagon and rubbing his eyes. "Well, little one, I'm sure we can do something about that. Zach, let's get a fire going." In no time at all, Ben and Zach had gathered some dry twigs and broken tree limbs and had a fire blazing. Zach rubbed his hands together, holding them over the flames. "Ah, you can't beat a good campfire. Warm enough for you, Marcus?" "Yes, Zach, thank you." Marcus sat hugging his knees, looking into the fire. "Hey, Zach, we've collected more wood," said Cyrus. Justin and Anna and Cyrus each were carrying a huge armload of wood. They stacked the wood neatly nearby so it would be ready to feed the fire to keep it going. Cyrus flipped some of his sticks into the air and began juggling them. This kept everyone amused for a bit, but it was getting much colder. So the children and Helena huddled around the fire while Ben and Zach watched Milo repair the broken wheel. From a short distance, of course. "Where did the leaders in the Ostian underground find that old smuggler, Ben?" Zach asked. "No one knows much about Milo, except that he's traveled just about every road, footpath, and goat trail in the Roman Empire." Said Zach, suitably unimpressed. "Look, there goes another one," shouted Cyrus, leaning back and pointed up at a shooting star in the sky. "Wow," Anna said. "And another," cried Cyrus. Ben walked over to the fire and sat down next to Marcus. "Ben, why do stars fall?" Marcus asked. "Well, I can't tell you the answer to that one, Marcus. That's a question for the Magi," Ben said. "Who's the Magi?" asked Justin. "Yes, I'd like to know too," broke in Anna. "Go on, Ben, tell them," said Helena. "We could be here for a while." Zach joined them, sitting close enough to the fire to stay warm, but off to one side so he can keep an eye on Milo. "Well, the Magi are men who study the stars. In fact, a group of them play a part in one of my favorite stories. It is a very special story and quite new too, so different from the ones I usually tell about Jesus. Come on, huddle together and I'll tell you." Ben looked at each one of the eager young faces, then started the story. "A long time ago, when my father was still just a boy, several Magi discovered a new star." "In the sky?" "Yes, Marcus, in the sky," chuckled Ben, ruffling Marcus's hair as the youngster snuggled back against Ben's large paunch. "But this star had a special meaning. These Magi knew somehow that the new star meant that a special king had been born, so they decided to follow the star in hopes of finding this new king. It took them a long time. The Magi traveled for nearly 2 years, always following the star, before they finally came to Jerusalem, the capital city of Israel. Unfortunately, there was already a king living in Israel at the time. His name was Herod. He was a vain man, a bit like our Nero. He was also very cruel like Nero and moody. He lived in constant fear that someone would steal his throne. So he was very cruel to his subjects. Why would someone want to steal his chair, Ben? Cyrus asked. Not his chair, his throne, his seat of power, his right to be king. Oh. Hush, Cyrus, said Anna. Let Ben continue. Thank you, Anna. As I was saying, Herod was afraid that someone would steal his kingdom from him. Of course, his staff all thought he was slightly mad. The idea that someone would steal his throne did seem to be a little crazy. After all, he had soldiers to protect him. But Herod was still worried, and he was willing to do anything to remain king, even kill his own wife and family if necessary.
That's stupid.
Well, as you can imagine, the appearance of the Magi in Jerusalem made Herod very suspicious. He had been told that they were riding toward Jerusalem. As soon as they arrived, he sent for them. Why have you come to Jerusalem? He asked. The Magi replied, We have come to worship the child who was born to be king of the Jews. Do you know where we might find him? Herod was furious and stormed out of the room. He called a meeting of his advisors. At the meeting, the advisors sat around a large table, and Herod thumped the table angrily. I am the king of the Jews, their only king. Herod thumped the table again. Where can I find this other king they speak of? The elders all looked at each other and discussed the news that the Magi had brought about a new king. They studied scrolls and other important documents. Finally, the eldest advisor stood up, turned to Herod, and said, He is to be found in Bethlehem, just as the prophet Micah predicted 800 years ago. Bethlehem, you say? Said Herod, with a wicked grin. Well done. Herod immediately summoned the Magi to appear before him again at the palace. I am advised that the child you seek is in Bethlehem. When you find him, come back and tell me where he is. Herod paused and grinned, for I too would like to worship him. Then King Herod asked the Magi one more question, a very important question. When did you first learn about this child? We first saw the star 2 years ago, they told the King Herod. And so the Magi, riding their camels, traveled the road out of Jerusalem to the nearby village of Bethlehem. There, the child, who would have been about 2 years old by then, lived with his parents, Mary and Joseph. It was Joseph who answered the door when the Magi knocked. When he let them in, they saw the child sitting on Mary's lap. They knelt before him and gave him presents, gold fit for a king, frankincense for worship, and last, a very unusual present, myrrh. This was a strange present because myrrh is usually used during the burial of the dead, but it was one of the presents they brought. Perhaps the Magi knew that some sorrow would befall this little boy. Who knows? They never said. Because later that night, one of the Magi had what can only be described as a very vivid nightmare. He awoke immediately and discussed it with his friends. And then, just as suddenly as they had arrived, they left, leaving Mary, Joseph, and their little boy behind. Ben? Yes, Justin? Where did they go? Well, no one knows where the Magi went, but one thing is certain. They did not return to Jerusalem or to King Herod's palace. Was Herod angry? Angry. He was livid. When Herod realized the Magi had tricked him, he flew into one of his terrible rages. He ranted and raved at his advisors and everyone else who would listen. He called the Magi sorcerers and accused them of trying to hide the child from him. So be it, Herod said. By the time I am finished, they'll wish they'd delivered him to me on a plate. Then Herod did a very wicked thing. He ordered the captain of the palace guard to assemble his men immediately. He told them to search all of Bethlehem and kill every male child who was 2 years or younger. Not one was to escape alive. But that's terrible, Ben, said Anna, clearly upset. None of the others said a word. It was not like Ben to tell a sad story, and this one had taken them all by surprise. Even Zach was silent. For a long time they stared at the flames and listened to the popping and crackling of the fire as sparks burst into the air. Somehow, looking for shooting stars had lost its appeal. Suddenly, the silence was broken by a great howling. Oh! The children jumped up. What could it be?